The blinding pain of grief etched itself into Bethany Sullivan's heart as deeply as the knife in her hand etched the name into the ancient oak. Tears blurred her vision as she carved the final letter, her fingers trembling with each stroke against the rough bark. The crisp autumn air of 1876 swirled around her, carrying golden leaves across the vast Washington Territory wilderness that had claimed so much from her in such a short time. She didn't hear the approaching hoofbeats until they were nearly upon her. Startled, she turned, knife still clutched in her hand, to see a tall figure dismounting from a magnificent chestnut stallion. The stranger's weathered face was partially hidden beneath the brim of a dusty hat, but his eyes, keen and observant, took in the scene before him. He stepped forward, respectfully removing his hat. "I'm sorry for your loss, madam," he said softly. Reading the freshly carved name on the tree, Bethany stiffened, quickly wiping tears from her cheeks. "You don't know anything about my loss," she responded, her voice hoarse from crying. "No, madam, I don't," he conceded, his voice carrying a gentle timbre that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. "But I know grief when I see it." The name on the tree, Thomas Sullivan, stood out in stark relief against the pale bark. The letters were wobbly but deep, as if she'd been determined to make them last forever. "He was my brother," Bethany said after a long silence. "Died of fever 3 days ago. I buried him yesterday." The stranger nodded slowly. "My name's Maxwell Young," he offered, not moving any closer. "Most folks just call me Max." "Bethany Sullivan," she replied automatically, the social graces her mother had instilled in her taking over despite her distress. I should be getting back. My cabin's not far." She gestured vaguely toward a plume of smoke rising above the trees in the distance. "Would you allow me to escort you, Miss Sullivan? These woods aren't always kind to those traveling alone." Bethany hesitated. In the 3 months since she'd arrived in the territory with Thomas, seeking a fresh start after losing their parents to influenza back east, she'd learned to be wary of strangers. But there was something in Maxwell Young's eyes, a gentle understanding, perhaps, that didn't trigger her usual caution. "I suppose that would be all right," she finally agreed, tucking the knife into the pocket of her apron. As they walked, leading his horse between them, Bethany found herself talking haltingly at first, then in a rush of words. She told him about Thomas, just 24 years old and full of dreams about building a life in the West. How he'd saved for years to purchase the small homestead. How they'd arrived in summer, full of hope, only to have Thomas fall ill as autumn approached. "The doctor from Seattle couldn't reach us in time," she said, her voice hollow. "The creek flooded, and by the time the waters receded enough for him to cross." She trailed off, unable to finish. Max listened without interruption, occasionally nodding to show he was following her story. When they reached the small log cabin nestled in a clearing, he remained respectfully by his horse. "Thank you for walking with me, Mr. Young," Bethany said formally, suddenly aware that she'd shared intimate details with a complete stranger. "It was no trouble," he assured her. He hesitated, then asked, "Will you be staying here, Miss Sullivan?" The question caught her off guard. In truth, she hadn't thought beyond her grief. The cabin belonged to her now, but what could a single woman of 22 do with a homestead in the wilderness? I don't know," she admitted. Max nodded thoughtfully. "I'm staying at the Willow Creek trading post about 5 miles east of here. I'll be there for another week before moving on. If you need any assistance, well, you know where to find me." With that, he tipped his hat, mounted his horse, and rode away, leaving Bethany to wonder about the kind stranger who had shared her grief, however briefly. The following morning dawned cold and clear. Bethany woke to the harsh reality of her situation. The pantry held enough supplies to last perhaps 2 weeks, and winter would arrive soon. Thomas had planned to take on carpentry work in Seattle to earn money for their first year, but that possibility had died with him. She dressed quickly and stepped outside, breathing in the crisp morning air. The homestead was beautiful. That much was undeniable. 10 acres of land, including a small orchard that Thomas had been ecstatic to discover. The cabin itself was sturdy but simple, one main room with a stone fireplace, a small sleeping loft above, and a lean-to that Thomas had planned to expand into a proper kitchen. As she walked the property's boundaries, Bethany found herself at the old oak tree again. In daylight, her carving looked even more amateurish, the letters uneven and crude. Below Thomas's name, almost without conscious thought, she began to carve their parents' names. "Your family," Bethany jumped, nearly cutting her finger on the knife. Maxwell Young stood a few yards away, holding a burlap sack. "Mr. Young, you startled me." "My apologies," he said, approaching slowly. "I brought some provisions, thought you might need them." Bethany's pride warred with practicality. "That's very kind, but I can't accept. Consider it a loan, then," Max interrupted gently. "You can repay me when you're able." She studied him in the morning light. He was older than she'd initially thought, perhaps 30 or so. His face was tanned from years outdoors, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he wasn't smiling now. His clothes were well-worn but clean dark trousers, a blue cotton shirt, and a leather vest. Not the typical attire of the rough men who sometimes pass through these parts. "Why would you help a stranger?" she asked bluntly. Max set the sack down and leaned against the tree, careful to avoid the freshly carved names. "I lost my younger brother too," he said after a moment. 6 years ago, stagecoach accident near Denver. I know what it's like to feel that the world's moved on while you're still frozen in grief." His honesty disarmed her. "I'm sorry about your brother, as am I about yours." He gestured toward the cabin. "May I ask what your plans are?" Bethany sighed, tucking a stray strand of auburn hair back into her simple bun. "I don't know. I can't manage this place alone. I suppose I should sell it and return east, but—" She looked around at the majestic trees surrounding them, at the distant mountains visible through a break in the forest. Thomas loved it here. This was his dream. "What about your dream, Miss Sullivan?" The question caught her by surprise. "My dream?" "Yes. What did you hope to find out west?" Bethany considered this. She'd followed Thomas because he was the only family she had left, but she'd harbored her own desires too. "Independence," she said finally. "A chance to build something of my own." Back in Boston, there were so many expectations for a young woman to marry well, to be decorative and agreeable. "Here, I thought things might be different," Max nodded. "They can be. It's not easy for a woman alone, but it's not impossible either." He picked up the sack again. "At least let me help you carry this inside. Then you can decide whether to accept it or throw me off your property." Despite herself, Bethany smiled. "Very well, Mr. Young, I accept your help for now." The provisions Max brought were generous: flour, coffee, sugar, bacon, beans, and even a small sack of apples. As Bethany arranged them on her modest shelves, Max surveyed the cabin. "Your brother did good work," he observed, running a hand along the smooth, planed surface of the table Thomas had crafted. "He was a carpenter. He was learning," Bethany replied. "Our father was a furniture maker in Boston. Thomas apprenticed with him before." She trailed off. "Before your parents passed," Max finished gently. "I'm sure he learned well." Bethany nodded, blinking back tears. "He did. He was planning to build furniture to sell in Seattle." Max moved to the window, looking out at the small barn and the fenced corral beyond. "You have livestock?" "Just 1 milk cow and 2 horses, and a few chickens." "Good, that's a start." He turned back to her. Miss Sullivan, I'm not one to impose, but I have a proposition for you. Bethany tensed. She'd heard propositions from men before, usually thinly veiled improprieties. Seeing her expression, Max quickly continued. Nothing untoward, I assure you. I've been working as a cattle driver, moving herds north from Oregon. The season's ending and I'm looking for winter work. If you're planning to stay, you'll need help preparing for winter. I'm handy with tools and I know a bit about farming. Are you suggesting I hire you? With what money, Mr. Young? No money needed, he said. Room and board in your barn would be payment enough. Come spring, when you decide what to do with the property, we part ways, no obligations. Bethany regarded him skeptically. That's a generous offer. Too generous. Why would you do that? Max's expression grew more serious. Because 6 years ago, when I lost my brother, I wished someone had offered me a helping hand instead of whiskey and hollow sympathy. And because I've been drifting too long, he shrugged. Or maybe I just don't fancy the idea of a young woman freezing to death because she's too proud to accept help. His bluntness made her smile despite herself. You're very direct, Mr. Young. Life's too short for anything else, Miss Sullivan. Bethany considered his offer. It was unconventional, certainly, and potentially scandalous, but she was miles from the nearest neighbor, and winter was approaching fast. Without help, her chances of survival were slim. You'd stay in the barn, she clarified. Yes, madam. And come spring, if I decide to sell and leave, there are no expectations. None whatsoever. Bethany took a deep breath. Very well, Mr. Young, I accept your proposition on a trial basis. 1 week. If either of us is dissatisfied after that time, we part ways with no hard feelings. Max nodded, offering his hand. That sounds fair. As they shook hands, Bethany couldn't help but wonder if she was making a terrible mistake or the first wise decision since losing her brother. The first week passed quickly, as Max helped Bethany prepare for winter. He repaired the barn roof, split enough firewood to last through the coldest months, and built shelves in the root cellar for the vegetables they harvested from Thomas's modest garden. Bethany found herself watching him often. He worked methodically, with a quiet competence that reminded her of her father. Unlike Thomas, who had always been in a hurry talking constantly about his plans, moving from one project to the next, Max took his time, focusing completely on each task before moving to the next. On the 7th day, as they sat on the cabin's small porch drinking coffee in the crisp evening air, Bethany brought up their agreement. The week is up, Mr. Young. Max nodded, staring into his coffee cup. So it is. You've been a tremendous help, she continued. I would be grateful if you stayed, at least until the worst of winter passes. He looked up, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Are you sure, Miss Sullivan? I can be rather stubborn about doing things the right way. Bethany chuckled. I've noticed. And yes, I'm sure. Though I wish you would call me Bethany. Miss Sullivan makes me feel like a schoolteacher. Then I'm Max, he replied. And I'd be happy to stay, Bethany. As autumn deepened into winter, Bethany and Max fell into a comfortable routine. He woke before dawn to tend to the animals while she prepared breakfast. They worked together during the daylight hours, preserving food, making candles, mending clothes and tools. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes in companionable silence. Bethany learned that Max had been born in Missouri, but had spent most of his adult life moving from place to place: Texas, Colorado, California, Oregon. He'd been a ranch hand, a miner, a cattle driver, even a deputy sheriff for a brief time. Why so restless? She asked one evening as snow fell softly outside. Max stared into the fire. After my brother died, nothing felt right. I kept thinking the next place would be different, that I'd find whatever I was looking for. And did you? He looked at her then, his eyes reflecting the firelight. Not yet. But I'm beginning to think it might not be a place I've been seeking all this time. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Bethany felt her cheeks flush and looked away, suddenly conscious of how improper their arrangement might seem to others, though nothing inappropriate had occurred. "I should turn in," she said, rising from her chair. "Good night, Max." "Good night, Bethany," he replied softly. As December arrived with its shortest days and longest nights, Bethany found herself thinking less about Thomas and more about Max. She still grieved for her brother, visiting the oak tree whenever the weather allowed, but the sharp pain had dulled to a more manageable ache. One morning, after a particularly heavy snowfall, Bethany woke to find Max already gone from the barn. Following his tracks in the snow, she discovered him at Thomas's grave near the edge of the clearing. He had cleared the snow from the simple wooden marker and placed a small arrangement of evergreen boughs at its base. Bethany approached quietly, not wanting to intrude on what seemed like a private moment. "Good morning," Max said without turning around. "I hope you don't mind." It seemed wrong to leave his resting place covered in snow. "I don't mind," Bethany replied, touched by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you." Max stood, brushing snow from his knees. "I've been thinking about something. With your permission, I'd like to craft a proper headstone come spring. Nothing elaborate, but something that would last longer than wood." Bethany felt tears well in her eyes. "You would do that?" "I would," he said simply. Without thinking, she stepped forward and embraced him, her cheek against the rough wool of his coat. After a moment's hesitation, his arms encircled her, strong and warm. "Thank you," she whispered. They stood there longer than was proper, drawing comfort from each other in the quiet winter morning. When they finally separated, something had shifted between them, a new awareness, an unspoken acknowledgement of growing feelings. As they walked back to the cabin together, Max cleared his throat. "Bethany, I've been meaning to ask. There's a Christmas gathering at the trading post next week. Would you consider attending with me?" Bethany hesitated. She hadn't been around other people since Thomas's death, and the thought was both appealing and intimidating. "I haven't anything suitable to wear," she admitted. "You look fine just as you are," Max assured her, then added with a small smile, "But if it matters to you, I happen to know Mrs. Peterson at the post has a trunk of fabric she's looking to trade. I could take you there tomorrow if you'd like." The idea of crafting something new, of preparing for a social occasion, awakened something in Bethany that had been dormant since her arrival in the West. "I'd like that very much," she decided. The trading post was a day's journey on horseback, made longer by the snow-covered trails. They departed at dawn, with Max insisting Bethany ride his stallion Caesar while he rode Thomas's more temperamental gelding Spirit. "Caesar's sure-footed in the snow," he explained, "and a bit more patient with inexperienced riders." Bethany laughed. "I'll have you know I've been riding since I was 6 years old, Mr. Young." "Is that so, Miss Sullivan?" he teased back, using the formal address they'd long since abandoned in private. "Then perhaps you'll demonstrate some of your equestrian expertise along the way." The journey was pleasant despite the cold. Max pointed out landmarks and told stories of his travels, making Bethany laugh with tales of misadventures on cattle drives and in mining camps. By midday, they reached a high ridge overlooking a valley where the Willow Creek trading post stood, a collection of log buildings surrounded by a wooden palisade. "It's larger than I expected," Bethany remarked as they began their descent. "It serves a wide area," Max explained. "Settlers, trappers, miners, and several Indian tribes all trade here. Jack Peterson, the owner, is fair with everyone, which is rarer than it should be in these parts." As they approached the gates, Bethany felt a flutter of nervousness. It had been months since she'd interacted with anyone besides Max, and before that, Thomas. "You look beautiful," Max said quietly, as if reading her thoughts, "and everyone will be delighted to meet you." His confidence bolstered her own, and she sat taller in the saddle as they rode through the gates. The trading post was busy despite the season. Trappers in fur-lined coats haggled over prices for their pelts. A group of Duwamish men traded smoked salmon and intricate baskets for metal tools. Women in practical frontier attire examined bolts of fabric and bags of sugar. Jack Peterson himself emerged from the main building to greet them, a barrel-chested man with an impressive white beard and twinkling eyes. "Maxwell Young," he boomed. "Thought you might have moved on by now." "And who is this lovely lady?" "Jack, this is Miss Bethany Sullivan." "Bethany, this is Jack Peterson, the most honest thief west of the Mississippi." Peterson roared with laughter. "That's rich coming from you, you silver-tongued cattle rustler." He turned to Bethany with a warm smile. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Sullivan. Any friend of Max's is welcome here." Bethany returned his smile, instantly at ease with the jovial trader. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson. I understand your wife might have fabric to trade." "Indeed she does, and she'll be tickled pink to have another woman to talk to. Martha," he called over his shoulder. "Come meet Max's lady friend." Bethany felt her cheeks flush at the implication but didn't correct him. A moment later, a plump, cheerful woman with silver-streaked dark hair appeared, wiping her hands on her apron. "Well, well," Martha Peterson said, her eyes moving between Max and Bethany with evident curiosity. "About time you brought a woman around, Maxwell Young. Come inside, dear. Let's get you warmed up and show you those fabrics." With an amused glance at Max, Bethany allowed herself to be ushered into the Petersons' private quarters behind the trading post, where a fire blazed in a large stone hearth, and the aroma of baking bread filled the air. "Now," Martha said once she'd settled Bethany with a cup of tea, "tell me everything. How did you and our wandering cowboy meet? And what brings you to this wilderness?" Over the next hour, Bethany found herself sharing her story: Thomas, the homestead, her grief, and Max's unexpected arrival. Martha listened attentively, occasionally clucking sympathetically or asking gentle questions. "And now there's to be a Christmas gathering," Bethany finished. "Yes, indeed," Martha confirmed. "Nothing fancy, mind you, but we do our best to bring a little civilization to the frontier. Now, let's see about that fabric." From a large wooden chest, Martha produced an array of materials: calicos and ginghams in practical colors, a length of dark green wool, and most surprisingly, a bolt of deep blue silk. "That came all the way from San Francisco," Martha explained, seeing Bethany's fingers hover over the luxurious material. "A bit impractical for every day, but for a special occasion." "It's beautiful," Bethany admitted, "but I couldn't possibly afford—" "Nonsense," Martha interrupted. "I've been holding on to it for 2 years, waiting for someone who would appreciate it properly. Consider it a Christmas gift. But no arguments." Martha cut the fabric with practiced efficiency. "Max told Jack how you've been managing that homestead all alone. That takes courage, girl. And courage deserves to be rewarded now and then." Bethany left the Petersons' quarters 2 hours later with the blue silk wrapped carefully in brown paper, as well as practical fabrics for everyday use, and a promise to return for the Christmas gathering in a week's time. She found Max in the trading post's small tavern, deep in conversation with a weathered-looking man in a fringed buckskin jacket. "Ah, here she is," Max said, standing as Bethany approached. "Bethany, this is Caleb Wilkins. He traps in the mountains north of your homestead." "Pleasure, madam," Wilkins said, touching his hat respectfully. "Max here's been telling me about your brother's carpentry skills. I'm building a cabin myself, could use some proper windows come spring. Thomas made a few window frames before he fell ill, Bethany said. They're in the barn. I'd be happy to sell them to you. Much obliged, Wilkins replied. I'll stop by after the thaw. He nodded to Max. Think on what I said about that bear. It's been causing trouble for miles around. After Wilkins left, Bethany raised an eyebrow. Bear. Nothing to worry about, Max assured her, though his expression was serious. Just something to be aware of. Apparently, there's an unusually large grizzly that's been raiding cabins in the area. Wilkins thinks it might be wounded, making it more aggressive. Bethany felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter weather. How close to my homestead? 10 miles or so, Max said, but it's moving south. With the snow as deep as it is, we'll need to be cautious when we return. He noticed the package in her arms. Did you find suitable fabric? Bethany nodded, momentarily distracted from thoughts of the bear. Mrs. Peterson was incredibly generous. She gave me this beautiful silk and wouldn't accept payment. That sounds like Martha, Max said with a smile. She's been trying to marry me off to someone suitable for years. I suspect she sees an opportunity. His words hung in the air between them, both an acknowledgement of possibilities and a question. Bethany felt her heartbeat quicken. And is there, she asked softly, an opportunity? Max's expression grew serious. I think there might be, Bethany. If you were amenable. Before she could respond, Jack Peterson's voice boomed across the tavern. Young, got a fellow here looking for an experienced cattle man. Says he'll pay good money for help getting his herd through the pass before the next storm. The moment broken, Max sighed. We should stay the night here, he said. Start back at first light tomorrow. I'll go see what Peterson's new friend wants. Bethany nodded, both disappointed and relieved at the interruption. Her feelings for Max had grown steadily over the past weeks, but the thought of acknowledging them aloud was both exhilarating and terrifying. They spent the night at the trading post, Bethany in a small room in the Petersons' quarters, Max in the common bunkhouse with the trappers and travelers. The following morning dawned clear but cold, and they set out early for the homestead. Max was unusually quiet as they rode, his eyes constantly scanning the forest around them. By midday, Bethany understood his caution. Fresh bear tracks crossed their path, massive paw prints in the snow heading in the same direction they were traveling. We should make haste, Max said grimly. I'd rather not be in these woods after dark. They pushed the horses harder, making good time despite the difficult conditions. By late afternoon, they were within a mile of the homestead when Caesar suddenly reared, nearly unseating Bethany. Whoa, she cried, fighting to control the usually placid horse. Bethany, ride for the cabin, Max ordered, his voice tight as he drew his rifle from its scabbard. Now, 50 yards ahead, a massive grizzly bear emerged from the trees, its shaggy coat dusted with snow, one ear torn and bloody. It rose on its hind legs, towering above the trail, and let out a deafening roar. Bethany's heart hammered in her chest, but years of riding kept her calm enough to control Caesar, who danced nervously beneath her. Go, Max shouted again, positioning himself between her and the bear. I won't leave you, she protested. I'll be right behind you. Go, Bethany. The urgency in his voice convinced her. With a final glance at Max, she turned Caesar and galloped toward home, the sounds of spirits' nervous whinnying fading behind her. She reached the cabin in minutes, dismounted quickly, and secured Caesar to the hitching post. Without hesitation, she ran inside and grabbed Thomas's shotgun from above the door. Checking that it was loaded, she hurried back outside, scanning the trail anxiously. The minutes stretched endlessly as she waited, fear growing with each passing moment. Just as she was preparing to head back down the trail, she heard the thunder of hooves. Max appeared, riding hard, his face grim. "Inside," he called as he approached. "Quickly." Once they were safely inside the cabin, Max barred the door and moved to the window, keeping watch. "What happened?" Bethany demanded, her hands still clutching the shotgun. "I fired a warning shot," Max explained, his breathing still heavy from the ride. "It backed off momentarily, but then charged. I had to shoot it, hit it in the shoulder. It retreated into the trees, but it's wounded and angry. It might come this way." Bethany felt a surge of relief that Max was unharmed, quickly followed by renewed fear about the wounded bear. "What do we do now?" "We wait," Max said simply. "Keep the animals secure in the barn and stay inside after dark. Come morning, I'll go out with Wilkins and some of the other men from the trading post to track it down." "You're going back out there?" Bethany couldn't keep the alarm from her voice. Max turned from the window, his expression softening as he saw her distress. "A wounded bear that size is a danger to everyone in the area. It needs to be dealt with." He crossed the room and gently took the shotgun from her trembling hands. "But not tonight. Tonight, we're safe here together." The fire crackled in the hearth as twilight deepened outside. Max checked the windows and doors one final time before joining Bethany at the table, where she had prepared a simple meal of beans, bacon, and cornbread. They ate in companionable silence, the day's excitement slowly giving way to exhaustion. As Bethany cleared the dishes, Max stoked the fire, adding several large logs to last through the night. "You should get some rest," he suggested. "It's been a long day." Bethany nodded, suddenly aware of how tired she truly was. Yet something kept her from climbing the ladder to her sleeping loft. Instead, she moved to sit beside Max near the fire. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for protecting me today, for everything these past weeks." Max's eyes reflected the dancing flames as he turned to look at her. "You don't need to thank me, Bethany." "Yes, I do," she insisted. "When Thomas died, I thought I was alone in the world. I didn't know how I would survive. And then you appeared, reading his name on that tree." She paused, gathering her courage. "You've become very important to me, Max." His expression grew serious as he reached for her hand. "And you to me. More than I expected, more than I've allowed anyone to be for a very long time." Bethany's heart raced as she leaned closer. "What does that mean for us?" "It means," Max said softly, "that for the first time in 6 years I'm not looking for the next place to go. I'm exactly where I want to be." The kiss that followed was gentle at first, a tentative exploration that quickly deepened into something more urgent, more needful. When they finally separated, Bethany felt breathless, her world irrevocably changed in the space of a moment. "I should go," Max said reluctantly, standing. "Back to the barn." Bethany caught his hand. "Stay," she whispered. "Please, just to talk, to be near. I don't want to be alone tonight." Max hesitated, clearly torn between propriety and desire. "Are you certain?" "I am," she assured him. "We've lost too much time already, both of us. I don't want to lose any more." He nodded slowly and sat back down beside her. They talked far into the night about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Bethany spoke of her life in Boston, of the suitors her parents had encouraged, and the stifling expectations of society. Max revealed more about his brother, about the guilt he'd carried for not being there when the accident occurred. "I was supposed to meet him in Denver," Max explained, his voice rough with emotion. "But I got delayed in Santa Fe. If I'd been there, maybe I could have prevented it somehow." "Or maybe you'd have died too," Bethany said gently. "We can't know, Max. We can only move forward." As the fire burned low, Bethany found herself growing drowsy, her head resting against Max's shoulder. He shifted to make her more comfortable, his arm around her waist. "I love you, Bethany Sullivan," he murmured, so softly she wondered if she'd dreamed the words. But when she tilted her face up to his, the truth of his feelings was clear in his eyes. "I love you too, Maxwell Young," she replied, the words coming easily, naturally, as if she'd always known them to be true. They fell asleep there before the dying fire, wrapped in each other's arms, the threat of the bear temporarily forgotten in the wonder of newfound love. Dawn broke clear and cold the next morning. Bethany woke first, momentarily disoriented to find herself on the floor before the hearth, wrapped in a blanket with Max's arm around her. The memory of the previous night, their conversation, their confessions, their first kiss flooded back, bringing a smile to her lips. Careful not to wake him, she slipped from beneath his arm and rebuilt the fire. As the kindling caught, she heard the unmistakable sound of horses approaching outside. Moving to the window, she saw a group of riders coming up the trail, Caleb Wilkins in the lead, followed by Jack Peterson and 3 other men she didn't recognize. "Max," she called softly, "we have company." He woke instantly, years of living in the wilderness having taught him the value of quick awareness. Joining her at the window, he nodded with satisfaction. "Good. Wilkins must have gathered a hunting party as soon as we left yesterday." He ran a hand through his tousled hair. "I should go meet them." As he moved toward the door, Bethany caught his arm. "Be careful," she said, rising on tiptoe to kiss him briefly. "Come back to me." His smile warmed her more thoroughly than any fire. "Always." The bear hunt lasted 2 days. Bethany remained at the cabin, anxiously watching the trail for Max's return. She busied herself with household chores and began cutting the blue silk for a new dress. But her thoughts remained with the hunting party, imagining all manner of terrible scenarios. When they finally returned late on the second day, Bethany rushed outside, heedless of the cold. Max rode at the head of the group, looking tired but triumphant. Behind him, a sledge carried the massive carcass of the grizzly. "You did it," she breathed as Max dismounted. "Wilkins did, actually," Max corrected, embracing her briefly. "He's the best tracker I've ever seen." The trapper tipped his hat at the compliment. "Couldn't have cornered it without Young's cool head, miss. Your man knows his business. Your man." The casual phrase sent a thrill through Bethany. She looked up at Max, who returned her gaze with equal warmth. "Will you all stay for supper?" she offered. "It's the least I can do to thank you." "Much obliged, madam," Peterson replied, "but we should get back. Martha will have my hide if we're late for Christmas preparations." "But we'll see you both at the gathering. Wouldn't miss it," Max assured him. After the men departed, taking the bear with them to be properly butchered and the valuable hide preserved, Max and Bethany were alone once more. He followed her into the cabin, where she immediately began preparing a hot meal. "There's something I need to ask you," Max said as they sat down to eat. Bethany felt a flutter of apprehension. "Yes, I've been offered a job." Peterson's friend, the cattle owner I met at the trading post, was impressed when he heard about the bear. "He wants me to oversee his ranch operations. It's good money, steady work." "I see," Bethany said carefully, trying to hide her disappointment. "When would you leave?" "That depends on you," Max replied. "The ranch is about 20 miles from here, too far to travel back and forth daily but close enough to visit regularly." "So you would be leaving," Bethany clarified, her appetite suddenly gone. Max reached across the table to take her hand. "Unless you'd consider coming with me. As my wife." Bethany's breath caught. "Your wife." "I know it's sudden," Max continued hurriedly. "We've only known each other a short time, but I love you, Bethany. I've never been more certain of anything. I want to build a life with you." "What about the homestead?" Bethany asked, her mind racing. "Thomas's dream." "It could still be part of our future," Max assured her. "We could keep it, visit when we can. Maybe someday, when we've saved enough, we could expand it, make it a proper farm." He squeezed her hand gently. but I'd understand if you prefer to stay here. If that's your choice, I'll find a way to make it work. I won't leave you, Bethany." Tears welled in her eyes at his sincerity. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, you'll stay here," Max asked, confusion evident in his voice. "No," Bethany laughed through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you, Maxwell Young. Yes, I'll come with you to the ranch. Yes to everything." Max's face broke into a radiant smile as he rose from his chair, pulled her to her feet, and kissed her with a passion that left no doubt of his feelings. When they finally separated, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "When?" he asked simply. "After Christmas," Bethany decided. "At the trading post. Martha Peterson will never forgive us if we deny her the chance to host a wedding." Max laughed, the sound joyous in the warm cabin. "You're probably right about that." The week leading up to Christmas passed in a blur of preparations. Bethany finished her blue silk dress, a creation far more elegant than anything she'd expected to wear in the wilderness. Max made daily trips between the homestead and the trading post, bringing back supplies and spreading news of their engagement on Christmas Eve. They rode together to the Willow Creek trading post, the night clear and cold, stars scattered across the black velvet sky like diamonds. The trading post was transformed. Pine boughs decorated every doorway, candles glowed in windows, and a massive spruce tree dominated the center of the main hall, adorned with handmade ornaments and strings of cranberries. Martha Peterson embraced Bethany warmly. "When Max told us the news, I could hardly believe it. My wandering cowboy finally ready to settle down." She held Bethany at arm's length, admiring the blue silk dress. "And don't you look a vision in that fabric? I knew it was meant for you." The celebration was unlike anything Bethany had experienced before. Settlers, trappers, miners, and members of local tribes gathered together to share food, music, and stories. A fiddler played lively tunes while couples danced on the packed earth floor of the main hall. Children darted between groups of adults, their excitement palpable as they anticipated the small gifts that would be distributed later. "May I have this dance, Miss Sullivan?" Max asked formally, offering his hand. He looked handsome in his best clothes, a clean white shirt, dark vest, and trousers, his usually unruly hair slicked back for the occasion. "I would be delighted, Mr. Young," she replied with equal formality, though her eyes sparkled with amusement. As he guided her through the steps of a country dance, Bethany couldn't help but marvel at the turns her life had taken. 3 months ago, she had been carving her brother's name into a tree, consumed by grief and uncertainty. Now, she was dancing in a frontier trading post, engaged to a man who had appeared in her darkest hour and brought light back into her world. "What are you thinking?" Max asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "That grief can lead to unexpected blessings," she replied honestly. "If Thomas hadn't died, if I hadn't been at that tree that day, we might never have met." Max's expression grew serious. "I believe we would have found each other somehow. Some things are meant to be, Bethany." As the night progressed, Jack Peterson called for everyone's attention. "Friends, neighbors, visitors, we have an announcement to make. As many of you know, Maxwell Young has been a frequent guest at our post over the years. What you might not know is that he's finally found a reason to stop wandering." Peterson raised his mug in Max and Bethany's direction. "To the future Mr. and Mrs. Young, may their wedding day next week be just the beginning of a lifetime of happiness." A cheer went up from the crowd, with many coming forward to congratulate the couple. Bethany felt a moment of self-consciousness at being the center of attention, but was quickly put at ease by the genuine warmth of the well-wishes. Among those offering congratulations was a Duwamish elder named Gray Feather, who presented Bethany with a beautifully woven blanket. "For your new home," he said in careful English, May it always be warm with love." Deeply touched, Bethany thanked him, her hands running reverently over the intricate patterns in the textile. "Gray Feather has traded with the post for 30 years, Max explained later. "He's highly respected among his people and the settlers alike." "This is all so different from Boston," Bethany marveled. "People from such different backgrounds coming together, celebrating together." "It's not always this harmonious," Max cautioned. "There are plenty of prejudices and conflicts in these territories. But at their best, frontier communities understand that survival depends on cooperation and mutual respect." As midnight approached, Jack Peterson distributed small gifts, candy for the children, practical items like needles or fishing hooks for the adults. To Bethany's surprise, Max presented her with a small wooden box. "I've been working on this in the barn when you weren't looking," he admitted as she opened it to reveal a delicately carved comb for her hair. The design incorporated oak leaves and pine branches, beautifully rendered in polished maple wood. "It's exquisite," Bethany breathed, running her fingers over the smooth surface. "I didn't know you could carve like this." "My father taught both my brother and me," Max explained. "I haven't done much of it in recent years, but I remembered enough for this." Bethany immediately removed the simple pins holding her hair and inserted the comb, the weight of it comforting against her scalp. "How does it look?" "Beautiful," Max replied, his eyes reflecting much more than appreciation for the comb. "Absolutely beautiful." They stayed at the trading post that night, Bethany again in the Petersons' quarters, Max in the bunkhouse. The following morning, Christmas Day, was celebrated with a communal breakfast before people began departing for their homes. "You're welcome to stay another night," Martha offered as Bethany and Max prepared to leave. "The weather looks unsettled." "Thank you, but we should get back to check on the animals," Bethany replied. "And I'd like to visit Thomas's grave before we leave for the ranch next week." Martha nodded understandingly. "Of course, dear, but remember to return in time for your wedding, 3 days from now as agreed." The ride back to the homestead was peaceful, the forest hushed under a fresh layer of snow. As they approached the clearing where the cabin stood, Max suddenly reined in his horse. "Wait," he said, his voice tight. Bethany followed his gaze and saw what had alarmed him. The cabin door stood ajar, smoke rising from the chimney. "Stay here," Max ordered, drawing his pistol. "No," Bethany countered firmly. "If someone's in there, we face them together." After a moment's hesitation, Max nodded. They approached cautiously, dismounting a short distance away and advancing on foot. Max positioned himself slightly ahead of Bethany as they reached the porch. "Hello, the cabin," he called. "Whoever's inside, come out with your hands visible." A moment of tense silence followed before the door opened wider. A young man stood in the doorway, his hands raised, his expression a mixture of fear and defiance. "I wasn't stealing," he said immediately. "Just needed shelter from the cold. I'll be on my way." Bethany studied the stranger. He was thin, perhaps 20 years old, with dark hair and a gaunt face that spoke of hard times. "What's your name, son?" Max asked, his tone less harsh but his pistol still ready. "Daniel Foster." "Where are you headed, Daniel?" Bethany inquired. The young man shrugged. "North, I guess. Heard there might be work in the logging camps." Max and Bethany exchanged a glance, a silent communication passing between them. With a slight nod, Max holstered his pistol. "You're welcome to share our meal before you move on," Bethany offered. "It's Christmas Day, after all." Daniel's surprise was evident. "You're not angry. We understand the need for shelter," Max replied. "But in the future, it's customary to ask permission before entering someone's home." The young man nodded vigorously. "Yes, sir. Won't happen again." Over a simple Christmas dinner, they learned more about Daniel. He had come west from Illinois after his parents died, hoping to find opportunity but encountering mostly hardship. He had worked odd jobs across several territories, but never managed to find stable employment. "I'm not afraid of hard work," he insisted. "Just need a fair chance." As they finished the meal, Max cleared his throat. "As it happens, we're moving to a ranch about 20 miles from here next week. I'll be needing reliable help." He glanced at Bethany, who nodded encouragingly. "There'd be room and board to start, wages once you've proven yourself." Daniel's expression transformed from weary resignation to cautious hope. "Are you serious, sir?" "I am," Max confirmed. "But I expect honest work and loyalty. No second chances if you betray our trust." "You won't regret it," Daniel promised fervently. "I'll work harder than anyone you've ever seen." And so, in the spirit of Christmas, their small family expanded unexpectedly. Daniel stayed in the barn that night, and over the next 2 days helped prepare the homestead for their temporary absence. He proved to be both willing and capable, reinforcing Max's instinct about the young man's potential. The day before their wedding, Bethany visited the oak tree one last time. She stood before it, tracing the carved names with her fingertips: Thomas Sullivan, her parents, the history of her losses etched permanently into the living wood. "I miss you," she whispered. "I will always miss you, but I've found happiness again, Thomas. I hope you can see that wherever you are." She felt Max's presence before she heard him, a warmth at her back that had become familiar and cherished. "Ready?" he asked gently. Bethany turned to face him, this man who had entered her life so unexpectedly and changed it so completely. "Yes," she replied. "I'm ready." They were married the next day at the Willow Creek trading post, with Jack Peterson officiating, and the entire community gathered to witness their vows. Bethany wore her blue silk dress with Max's carved comb in her hair. Max wore a new shirt and vest that Martha had insisted on altering to fit him properly. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises of love and fidelity that neither took lightly. When Peterson pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up seemed to shake the very rafters of the trading post. As they shared their first dance as a married couple, Max leaned close to whisper in Bethany's ear. "Do you know what I was thinking when I first saw you carving that name into the tree?" Bethany shook her head, curious. "I thought you were the bravest woman I'd ever seen," he continued. "Standing alone in the wilderness, honoring your loss with such quiet dignity. I wanted to know you immediately." Tears welled in Bethany's eyes. "And I thought you were presumptuous, reading those names without permission," she teased. Max laughed, the sound vibrating through her. "I was, but I'm grateful every day that I stopped, that I spoke to you." "As am I," Bethany replied softly. "As am I." 2 days later, they set out for their new home. Bethany, Max, and Daniel, along with their few possessions, loaded onto a wagon borrowed from Peterson. The ranch that awaited them was larger than Bethany had imagined, with a sturdy 2-story house, several outbuildings, and vast pastures for the cattle that would arrive in the spring. That first winter, as a married couple, was challenging but joyful. They worked hard establishing themselves at the ranch while making occasional trips back to the homestead to check on things. Daniel proved to be an invaluable addition, his eagerness to learn and willingness to tackle any task endearing him to both Bethany and Max. By spring, their household had grown again with the arrival of Martha Peterson's niece, Sarah, who came to help Bethany with domestic matters as the ranch operations expanded. The young woman's presence was especially welcome when, in early summer, Bethany discovered she was expecting their first child. "A baby," Max breathed when she told him, his face alight with wonder. "Our baby." Their son was born the following winter, a healthy boy they named Thomas Maxwell Young. in honor of both their brothers. As Bethany held their child in the bedroom of their ranch house, Max beside her, she marveled at how fully life had come full circle. "He has your eyes," she observed as the infant gazed up at them. "And your determination," Max countered with a smile, watching as their son gripped his finger with surprising strength. In the years that followed, their family and their enterprise flourished. The ranch became one of the most successful in the territory, known for fair dealings and quality livestock. Daniel Foster eventually became Max's right-hand man and later a partner in the business. He married Sarah Peterson, and they built their own home on adjacent land. Bethany and Max had 3 more children, twin daughters, Elizabeth and Margaret, and another son, James. Each summer, they would take the children to the original homestead, which they maintained as a retreat from the increasingly busy ranch. Bethany would show them the oak tree with its carved names, telling them stories of their Uncle Thomas and the grandparents they never knew. On the 10th anniversary of their meeting, Max surprised Bethany by taking her back to the tree alone, the children left in the capable care of Daniel and Sarah. "I have something to show you," he said, leading her through the familiar forest. When they reached the oak, Bethany gasped. Below the names she had carved so long ago, Max had carefully added new ones: their children, dates of their births, their growing family history continuing where her grief had once been the only marker. "It seemed right," Max explained, watching her reaction, "to have the whole story told here." Bethany ran her fingers over the fresh carvings, then turned to embrace her husband. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Thank you." As they stood together beneath the spreading branches of the oak, Bethany reflected on the strange and wonderful journey that had brought them to this moment. From the depths of grief had come the greatest joy she had ever known: a family, a legacy, a love that had transformed them both. "What are you thinking?" Max asked, just as he had on the night of their first Christmas together. Bethany smiled, leaning into his embrace. "That some endings are really beginnings in disguise. That day you found me carving Thomas's name, I thought my life was over. I never imagined it was just beginning." Max tightened his arms around her, his love as steady and true as it had been from the start. "Some things are meant to be, Bethany. Some people are meant to find each other, no matter what." As the afternoon light filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows around them, Bethany knew with absolute certainty that he was right. Their meeting had been no accident, no random confluence of grief and compassion. It had been the start of something meant to last a lifetime and beyond. In the names carved on an ancient oak, telling their story to generations yet to come.